I'm back. Merry Christmas and Happy Marijuanica. I took the afternoon off, so I'm broadcasting at my home office. So I figured I'd go into a little bit more on the marijuana laws and give everybody a kind of like a Cliff Note version of what the law does and what it does not do. Essentially, there were two groups created, the Cannabis Control Commission, I wonder how you get on that commission, and the Cannabis Advisory Board. And that is designed with, I believe, 15 members, each having a specific area of marijuana expertise. So I'd love to see the resumes of the people who got on that group. So growing in possession, the law legalized for recreational marijuana cultivation and possession the following. You can use and possess up to 1 ounce of marijuana in public, but you've got to be 21 years or older. You can use and possess up to 10 ounces in your home, and again, you got to be 21 years or older. Any person 21 years of older can give up to 1 ounce of marijuana to another person who is at least 21 years old. And I had a great question earlier by one of the persons that follows my site, and very clever. He said, can you give marijuana to someone and then, let's say, have him pay for a t-shirt for $100? Kind of like the scalped tickets if you're trying to get to the World Series or trying to sell your World Series tickets. That's probably a skirting around the law, which I do not believe, if you were seen doing, would go over too well by a police officer. So I would avoid selling marijuana at all costs. The law also gave the ability for anybody 21 years or older to possess and grow up to 6 plants in your home and up to 12 marijuana plants per household. However, there were some questions that came through earlier in the day about what landlords can do. And I was able to pull a little bit off of a website that I think is pretty accurate. And there's a key provision to the Act which provides that it's illegal to prevent a person from prohibiting or otherwise regulating the consumption, display, production, process, or manufacture of marijuana and marijuana accessories on a property that the person owns, occupies, or manages, except that a lease agreement shall not prohibit a tenant from consuming marijuana by other means other than smoking. As I read that, landlords have the ability, certainly, through a lease agreement to regulate smoking and the cultivation of marijuana in rental property, except that they cannot prohibit the consumption of marijuana edibles or any other form of non-smoking consumption. So that is one of the things I think becomes probably one of the more interesting areas. It's not really criminal, it's more real estate, but how landlords deal with tenancy, the tenants in, if the tenant smokes downstairs and it bothers the enjoyment of other people in the apartment complex. One of the things that the Act did make illegal is that you cannot grow marijuana in a place that is visible from a public area. So you can't grow plants on your front lawn if someone can see your front lawn when they're driving by the house. Can't operate a vehicle under the influence of marijuana. That is still the law. There's been no change in that law, and unless they come up with a way to figure out how to not only prove their case, but really to come up with some type of level that a person who's smoking would be able to blow into some type of breath test. Selling or giving marijuana to people under 21, illegal. Manufacturing without a proper license and under improper conditions are illegal. Selling marijuana on the school grounds and or on the grounds of correctional facility illegal, and that really hasn't really changed. Another question that was asked quite frequently is that, what about the workplace? And the best way to answer that pretty much would be to think about going to a job, going to an office while under the influence of alcohol. I don't think anybody would think that that is an appropriate thing, and I believe employers are not required to permit or accommodate marijuana use in the workplace. The medical marijuana program in Massachusetts was pretty much unaffected. Hope that didn't screw up the broadcast. The other question I remember that was asked about firearms in marijuana use, and because marijuana is still a scheduled controlled substance under federal law, I believe when you apply for a license, one of the questions is whether or not you're a user of drugs. So even though the laws in Massachusetts permit the use of marijuana, there might be some issues under federal law when filling out the application that you need to fill out under the pains of penalties of perjury. So that's something that you got to be very mindful of whenever you're dealing with that aspect of it. Another person asked a question as to how a person can get arrested for driving under the influence of marijuana. It's pretty much the same thing as operating under the influence. If you had an alcohol-related stop, an officer might look at the stop relative to how your driving pattern is, whether you missed a stop sign, whether you're traveling in a serpentine manner down the roadway, and then make a stop based on that. Then the officer's observations, certainly bloodshot, glassy eyes, unlike alcohol, a strong odor of marijuana in the vehicle, whether you were able to pronounce your words correctly, and obviously whether or not you had 2 or 3 bags of Doritos in the back seat that were empty. That personally would be the one kicker for me if I was a cop. So you pretty much go at it the same way, I would think, as a police officer, as you would an OUI with alcohol. It's not going to prevent police officers from making an arrest if they think you're impaired, even though ultimately it's going to be very difficult unless the laws change drastically to prove the case in court. In terms of an arrest, I've seen a remarkable number of arrests for OUI marijuana. I think when the medical marijuana law changed, it seemed to give people the wrong approach in terms of thinking that if it's okay for medical marijuana to be legal, then it's okay for me to drive on medical marijuana. But certainly, if you're impaired, then you shouldn't be behind the wheel. The other thing I wanted to touch on, because it is the holiday season, is being safe on the roadways and how to address OUI alcohol. I'll guarantee you between now and Monday, I'll have my phone ringing constantly for people who are either arrested for a first offense, second offense, maybe even a third or fourth offense. And although I don't believe there are any roadblocks this weekend, the police, I'm sure, will be out in force because Christmas Eve falls on a Saturday, and all I can tell you is that probably the best way not to have to call me in the morning or on Sunday morning is to not consume anything and get behind the wheel. Doesn't help my business out, but it sure does keep the roads a lot safer, and I'm sure most people would agree that safer roads is probably better than having clients in my office. So this is my second broadcast. I'm going to try to do this every week. And if you have any questions that you'd like to ask or have me answer, I can certainly do that. All you have to do is just fire away a question on Facebook, and it could either be under this feed or you can, when I announce it next week, you can certainly ask the question at that point. I'm toying with the idea of having a separate phone, so maybe people could call in, and I can kind of do a little bit more of a live broadcast. But Hope everyone has a great Christmas and Hanukkah. And I've got to go check my brisket, which is in the oven at 350. Bye-bye.